The Philadelphia Eagles secondary has been ravaged by injuries this season, to the point where at times not a single starter from week 1 has been on the field. But through all the trials and tribulations, Jim Schwartz and defensive backs coach Corey Underdog have found some great hidden gems stashed away on their cornerback depth chart. One of those names is Cre'von LeBlanc, a third-year cornerback out of Florida Atlantic who prior to joining the Eagles spent time with Detroit and Chicago. But since arriving prior to the team's 27-20 loss against Dallas, LeBlanc has developed into a steady, reliable option inside the nickel and has since drawn praise from Jim Schwartz and even earned a starting bid. So the question is, what is the ceiling for Cre'von LeBlanc and how does he fit into the team's feature plans? Is this really a true cornerback sleeper? Before we get into that though, we've got to understand the story as to why this film room is a little bit different. There's a running joke over on my Twitter, at LiamJenkins21, that during the primetime games, my analysis can get a little bit wackier than usual, due to the fact that they start at 1:20 AM here in England, which means a severe lack of sleep for me by the time I've actually finalised the report on the game, and a severe overdose in caffeine. So during the sheer elation of the Eagles overthrowing the LA Rams, there was one player that stood out, and that was Cre'von LeBlanc. And when he was taken off the field to be evaluated for a head injury, I was genuinely concerned. So upon his return, the excitement filled within me, and I coined the nickname Captain Cre'von. Now since then, the name has stuck and it has become the most on-brand thing imaginable, and throughout the game, as you can see on screen, things did get a little bit hectic and energized. So Captain Cre'von started making plays which eventually led to this work of art. And that then rapidly became my Twitter header, and then, believe it or not, his mother, so Cre'von LeBlanc's mother, reached out to me and thanked me for the praise I was giving her son, and she loved the fact there was so much positivity. The next morning, Mama Cre'von and Captain Cre'von himself both followed me on Twitter. This has been the most romantic love story imaginable. I would love to get Cre'von LeBlanc on for an interview on the Outside Insider podcast, but it even ended in an introduction to the podcast with a Christmas song rewritten in his honor. So today, it's finally here. I need your support for this one, guys. If we can get to 500 likes, that will be amazing. If you're not subscribed, do so already. This is the film room you've wanted to see. It's Cre'von LeBlanc time in Philadelphia. We're going to start off by looking at just how impactful LeBlanc has been in the open field. It's been a mesmerising development for the Eagles, a team that have struggled with tackling cornerbacks in recent memory. But here we're going to see him drop back and actually be held by Jared Goff, who does a great job at keeping his eyes staring down the corner, which allows his receiver to get open. But the closing speed here of Cre'von LeBlanc and his ability to somehow wrap his long arm around him is actually very, very impressive. That should have been a much bigger gain. LeBlanc hustles, makes a big tackle. We see another example of that in the same game against the Rams here. It's an open field situation. LeBlanc keeping his head on a swivel, adjusts his body well, and then comes crashing down onto the running back just to sweep up. It's a great play, and the fact that he's attacking that running back head on. The big problem we've seen with the Eagles corners, not named Russell Douglas this season, is that their tackling angles are so inconsistent and sporadic that the heavier ball carriers, the more powerful backs and receivers in the league, are able to get such an advantage once they get to the second level. But LeBlanc is composed, takes a firm stance with his feet shoulder width apart, wraps and drops to the floor. It's a great fireman's tackle, as I like to call it, which is definitely not the terminology that coaches use, but it's also the strength of his body that really stands out as well. He's got a very strong core, and this means he's able to, one, get off blocks very quickly, and two, really square up to those bigger wide receivers. The man's 5'11", he's not one of the rangier cornerbacks in the league, but just like Avonte Maddox, he's compact and he packs a punch. He comes powering down onto the ball carrier here, squaring up to him and driving his upper body weight, making the tackle. You can't tackle though without an aggressive mindset, and LeBlanc has a very tenacious chip on his shoulder. The aggression in run defense here to throw away that block and then come back and just hit Gurley, didn't have to, but there's just that extra chip on the shoulder. Now this is one of my favourite plays I've seen from LeBlanc, although he wasn't able to get that cherry on the cake, but the way he's able to come down and clog this rushing lane, he beats the receiver to the hole, and Todd Gurley there at that point is just doing Todd Gurley things. There's not much you can do. Cre'von tries to wrap him up, unfortunately brilliantly, wraps up his own teammate, but by that point TG30 is off to the races. But the instinct and the initial reaction and burst to fill that hole was beyond impressive. Here's another great look of cre'von LeBlanc actually getting off one of his blocks. But this is actually ridiculous, okay? Now look at how this play unfolds. cre'von gets matched up against a tight 10. He's been shoved downfield. He's been absolutely mauled, but uses his instincts to turn around, look for the ball and make a tackle. It's that same hustle that makes him such an asset in run defense and has seen a real spike in his tackles recently. If you've been around this channel or phillysportsnetwork.com for a while, you'll know I love cornerbacks, and I genuinely think that LeBlanc has got very sound coverage fundamentals. He's lining up here against former Eagles receiver DeAndre Carter, who actually gets a step on him, but it's not the step I'm concerned with at all. In fact, I'm actually impressed with the way LeBlanc's able to battle back. He's not a breakfast corner. He's not someone that will feast at the line of the scrimmage, and he's trying to keep inside leverage there, but gives it up on a step, but he keeps his head back into the backfield. And what I want you to look at this point in time is the fact that Deshaun Watson's head is actually looking in Carter's direction and he can't get the throw off. Why was there not enough time when there was a potential window? Because LeBlanc made contact at the line of scrimmage, disrupted the timing of the route, and that was all he needed. And that is what has been lacking from these Eagles corners when they play in off coverage. They're not strong in press situations, but even here again, he's beaten on what's essentially a stick and nod, but he's able to come back down, recover well, and make the tackle. What should this play unfold? He actually again tries to force a receiver outside. It just so happens that's where he was going anyway, and he does a little bit of a stumble. You'd think that was game over when he turns upfield, but he's got great deep speed. He's able to keep up with him and then get his hand out to bring down the legs of DeAndre Carter. That's a strong play, saving what could have been a home run hit in many other cornerbacks' shoes who may have fallen on that play. But what about his zone coverage? Because that's yet another area where LeBlanc is very strong, because he plays it a bit differently. Most corners in this situation keep their head forward, their body facing the receiver, but LeBlanc stays sideways and puts himself perfectly in the middle of a triangle of receivers, and as a result, that ball is going absolutely nowhere. And this is how LeBlanc approaches many of his zonal looks. He actually plays 90 degrees with his hips almost facing the sideline, his head on a swivel. This means that on a forced fumble play, this is one of the biggest plays of the game, LeBlanc perfectly situated between two receivers, Watson has to look elsewhere, that buys the pass rush time, and as a complete domino effect, the ball comes out, Eagles with a big play. But LeBlanc playing sideways is such a big asset to this secondary, and it is going criminally unnoticed. This is another great play from LeBlanc. There's a bunch formation coming his way. He's got two receivers going past him. The click and close in the open field to make that tackle is extremely impressive for a corner his size. The way he's able to plant that back leg and just launch himself forward so quickly, he's deadens the play straight in its tracks, and that is a very strong look from cre'von LeBlanc, who by this point in time was really settling in well for the Eagles, and he really has emerged as one of the team's top defensive assets. We'll see another example here. The positioning on that zonal look, again, his hips facing the sideline. Watson goes to take the check down, but because cre'von LeBlanc is perfectly situated between the receiver and the running back, there is nowhere for Watson to go. He tucks the ball back in, looks elsewhere, and it's a short check down over the middle instead. He's also extremely sticky in coverage, and this is difficult for quarterbacks who are trying to let those short, intermediate routes really develop that are so reliant on timing. Because what we're going to see here, although LeBlanc's footwork is a little bit sticky at the line, he's so physical through that stem, he doesn't want to let the receiver get an advantage, completely blankets the out route there. And we mentioned earlier that click and close, but what in this situation? Again, we've got three receivers coming his way. It's a zonal look. He's got a single safety over the top, which means he's responsible for about a third of the field. Perfectly situated in the middle of two receivers. The running back's coming at him. His head's on a swivel. He moves his hips so fluently, dives back down. Now, he actually did get penalised for that hit, but everything until that moment was great. Now, LeBlanc isn't perfect. There is definitely room for development, and much of that comes at the line of scrimmage. If we take a look here in a press situation, he's a little bit stagnant and reaches with his upper body first instead of opening his hips. That means that when the receiver's going to brush by, he has to reset his feet, readjust that centre of gravity, and then drive forward again. We see another example here, and it just means that if the wideout is breaking in the opposite direction, LeBlanc has so much extra work to do. If you slow it down and just look at the footwork, the receiver gets about 2 steps, and then it's the upper body that kind of wraps around, and then you're pushing back, like your feet are kind of off center, your upper body is in front, and then you've got to re-push forward, and if the receiver moves the opposite direction, that's where you can make those mistakes. We've seen that again a few times from several Eagles cornerbacks. I don't think it's a problem that should be concerning the Eagles too much. They don't really ask their corners to press too much, but in this situation, I think this is is the most telling of all. We'll see again, he's lined up in the slot, receiver gets a couple steps, and it's that hand that moves first. He's got the inside hand, his body facing outside, the receiver breaks the opposite direction. That forces a swift change of direction and a stumble. The thing is, when you're pressing at the line, ideally you want to create that punch with your upper body, stay square to your receiver, and then adjust to what their feet are doing. But it's such an instinctive process that it can be so easy to let that go. In zonal looks, so if you see his actual body fluidity like we see on this play, it's remarkable. It is literally Avonte Maddox level, the way he's able to open and close his hips so fluidly, and it's what you want to see from a nickel cornerback. I think Sidney Jones is still a little bit rigid in what he does with his hips, and this is a sort of thing we can expect to see in maybe year 3 of his development. But if you watch cre'von LeBlanc here, he keeps his head on a swivel again, opens his hips one way, head still facing the backfield, immediately turns, looks for the ball again, then adjusts, back for the ball again, his head constantly in the backfield, his body adjusting to what those eyes see, not the other way around, and that is a sign of a great dinner cornerback. And by that, I mean someone who feasts at the point of the catch. And if you want a great example, look at this, one of the final plays of the game, LeBlanc attacking the catch point of that ball in the end zone, and that may have been enough to seal the win for the Eagles. Again, this is a #1 receiver, one of the most talented in the league, against cre'von LeBlanc, who was signed 2 weeks before, with a huge swat over the top to send that ball away. It wasn't the only time he did it against the Giants either. Against Sterling Shepard, much of the same, a bit of contact there, and high pointing that ball. He does a great job to play through the hands of the wide receiver, get that ball out of harm's way. Overall, I think it's safe to say there is plenty of promise surrounding cre'von LeBlanc. The best thing is for the Eagles is that because they signed him as a free agent, he's actually got a 2-year deal, which means he's going to be with the team next year. So training camp's going to be very fun, but there is a legitimate argument to move Maddox to safety, Jones outside, and have cre'von LeBlanc as your starting nickel cornerback, and I am all for it. Captain cre'von is going to lead the Eagles defense next year as a vital part of that secondary. That's the hot take. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Are you team Captain cre'von? Do you want Captain cre'von shirts? I'm going to need your support on this one, guys. 500 likes if we can. If you're not subscribed already, make sure you're pounding that red button to the side, and don't forget you can follow myself and the work of 20 other writers over at my website, phillysportsnetwork.com, where we cover every Philadelphia sports team every day.